Hey everybody, how's it going? So I started doing DoorDash and things were going pretty good. I started getting my paychecks and then I'd go and spend them. And then one day I realized that there were no tax withholdings in any of my paychecks. So I started looking into it and then I remembered that when I signed up for DoorDash that I never filled out any tax forms. And there wasn't any that they had asked for. So I started looking into how DoorDashers were charged for taxes, and I started finding all sorts of terms that I had never heard of before, like independent contractor, estimated quarterly payments, 1099, things like that. And so I wanted to make this video to kind of go along with how I found the answers to all of my questions. And I imagine that this would be helpful for delivery apps other than just DoorDash, as Postmates, Grubhub, Uber Eats, things like that. Personally, I only did DoorDash and Grubhub, but I would imagine that this would be helpful for all the other apps. And I wanted to make a quick disclaimer. I'm not a tax professional. I've never worked for any tax preparation services or anything like that. I'm just trying to find answers to my own personal questions.
Okay, so the first thing you have to figure out is which tax bracket you fit into. And you can use your previous year's tax returns to find your total yearly income in order to figure out which tax bracket you fit into. So the first thing I did was I went to Google and I typed in tax brackets and brought up the different websites that show the tax brackets. And you can compare multiple websites to make sure that you know for sure which tax bracket is correct and that the numbers are all the same. I'm gonna go to Bankrate and check their tax brackets. So we have the tax brackets for last year and the tax brackets for the current year. For the beginning of this video, I'm going to be using the tax brackets for this current year to show how I can calculate the taxes that I need to do right now. Okay, so for now, I'm going to be using the 2020 tax brackets to figure out how much I should set aside currently. And based on my income from last year, I fit into the 22% tax rate tax bracket. So the next thing you need to find is your state tax bracket. I live in the state of California, so I'm going to be searching for the California tax brackets, but whatever state you live in, go to Google and type in your state tax bracket. And like I said before, compare multiple websites to make sure that you're getting the same numbers. So for this one, I'm going to go to H&R Block's website because it's easier to read. And I'm going to go down and find the tax bracket that I fit into. And according to this, I fit into the tax bracket of 8%. So we'll have to keep that in mind also and use that additionally while we're calculating how much to set aside. So the next thing I learned was that if you're doing a food delivery service with one of these apps, you're considered an independent contractor or a self-employed individual, and there's also an additional tax rate for being self-employed. So that is 15.3%, which consists of the Social Security and the Medicare. And so we'll have to keep that number in mind also and use it additionally when we are calculating how much to set aside. Okay, so I'm going to use one of my recent weeks with DoorDash to set up this example. So I typed in all of the earnings for every day. Okay, so now that we have the total earnings and the percentages for each one of the different tax rates, which I wrote the percentages above them so that they would be easier to remember, we can calculate how much to set aside for each one of these. So we'll go here and type in equals, and we'll select this and then multiply it by the rate. So that would be 0.22. And then press enter, and that will give us our amount of tax that we should set aside for the federal tax. And then we'll continue with the self-employed, type in enter, select the total value, multiply that by our percentage of 15.3%. So, and press enter. And then we'll also do our state tax, which is 8%. So we will do enter and select our total and multiply that by 8%. And that is our total for each of the 3 different tax amounts that we'll need to set aside. Okay, so now that we've learned how to calculate our taxes with the tax brackets, we need to focus on our deductions. And deductions are huge. They're a big way to save money on taxes based on all of your expenses. So record keeping is key here. I'm going to refer back to a Stride tax webinar that I watched that had a lot of good key points for filing your taxes as a self-employed individual or as an independent contractor. I took some screenshots from the webinar to help me remember some of the deductions that are commonly known for independent contractors and self-employed individuals. So here's a list of a few things that they had mentioned, and here's an additional list of other things. So deductions vary from person to person because everybody spends a different amount on their car or their gas or their auto insurance. All these different things are things that you can count for deductions. One helpful tip that I found in another YouTube video for deductions was to make all of your business expenses from one bank account or from one credit card, a way to keep them separate from your normal personal expenses. You could also use this same bank account when making your estimated payments later on, and that might be helpful in keeping things separate. Here is the URL for the webinar that I was watching and referring back to. I'll leave a link with this URL for the webinar in the description so that you could also watch it and get the information from it. So there's 2 ways you can deduct your vehicle expenses. You can either take the standard mileage rate for the current year, or you can take all of your expenses, your gas, your maintenance bills, your auto insurance, everything like that, and then you can track how many miles you had at the beginning and end of the year and figure out what percentage you used based on how many miles you used for your independent contractor services. So either way, you'll have to track your miles that you use for your delivery services. When I went to H&R Block this year to get my taxes done, they still asked for my mileage from the beginning of the year and the total miles that I used for DoorDash so that they could find the percentage of how much I used for DoorDash. So it may be a good idea to take a picture of your odometer at the beginning of each year, just in case, depending on where you get your taxes done. There are many different mileage tracking apps available to help track your mileage because this is one of the biggest deductions that you can have. After doing a little bit of research, I decided to use the Stride mileage tracker app. Overall, I've been fairly impressed with it. There's been a few times where it's done some strange things, but overall it's worked really well. I know there are a few other apps that work all right. Everlance and QuickBooks Self-Employed are another couple apps that people use. I did try using QuickBooks Self-Employed and I wasn't very happy with the mileage tracking. It didn't track all of my miles very well, so I ended up just using Stride instead. But there are other apps available. Also, I want to note that I'm not affiliated with Stride in any way. They're not sponsoring me. I just chose this app after doing some research and found that other people had liked using it. So now that we've learned about deductions, let's go ahead and add in our deductions for this week that I used for my earnings. So I took my mileage tracking from my app and I converted it to a dollar amount by multiplying the miles by the 57.5 cents per mile, which in this case the app has done it for me. And I put all of those amounts in underneath the earnings for each day until I got my total earnings. So now with your deductions, you can take the total earnings amount and subtract the total deductions amount and get your profit here. So then with those, this is where the deductions come into play. Now your taxes are no longer on just your earnings, but it's only on your profit. So instead of paying taxes on this $300, you're only paying taxes on this $180. So now you can take your federal tax and multiply it by the profit instead of the total earnings, and you end up with the $39.74, which is less than the $65.92. And then you can follow through and do it with each of the other two, and you'll see that they are much lower. So in this case, when you add them all up, the total amount before deductions would have been $135.73, and now with the profit from the deductions included, it's only $81.83, which is a savings of $53.90. So this way is kind of the lazy way. I took the standard deduction instead of deducting all of the different vehicle expenses. So which method you choose is up to you, depending on how much gas your car uses, or if your vehicle needs a lot of maintenance or things like that. It all depends on your situation. Some situations it might be more beneficial to take the standard amount, and other situations it might be beneficial to add everything up and find your total percentage. The whole purpose I made this spreadsheet was so that I would know how much to set aside from each paycheck so that I didn't overspend and then regret it later when I had to pay my taxes. So with this spreadsheet, you can continue it on from each week that you do and use the calculations in order to find out. For example, this one I need to set aside $81.83 for taxes, and then the rest I can spend. Okay, let's talk a little bit about estimated quarterly taxes. So I went to the IRS website, and they have listed here the dates of when you need to pay your quarterly taxes. So as you can see here, the June 15th was extended to July 15th. Also, the April 15th deadline was extended to July 15th this year due to the circumstances. So normally you'll pay on April 15th, June 15th, September 15th, and for the time between September 1st and December 31st, you'll pay on January 15th of the following year. So I just want to add a quick note in here. When I went and filed my taxes at H&R Block this year, they said that since I had a high enough amount of deductions in my full-time job, since I was only doing DoorDash part-time, that I actually didn't even need to make these estimated quarterly payments. So if you've missed the date to pay some of these, you may be okay, but just to be safe, you should try to pay your quarterly taxes on time. To figure out how much I needed to pay each quarter, I used the spreadsheet and added up all of my earnings every week and all of my deductions and got my profit and figured out the taxable amount that I needed to get for each week and paid them by the deadline for each quarter. Okay, let's go through how to make a quarterly estimated payment. So for both the federal and the self-employment tax, you'll pay them both to the IRS. So you'll go to the IRS website, and down here on the right, click on the Make a Payment tab. And then scroll down, and there's two options on the left where it says Pay Your Taxes Now. One is bank account and the other one is debit or credit card. The debit or credit card charges you a fee, so I've never actually used it. I've always done bank account or direct pay. So you click on the bank account option, and then you go to Make a Payment. And then here you'll select your reason and you'll do estimated tax. And then you'll choose the year that it's for and you'll press continue and continue. And then you'll have to fill out all your information in order to continue on from here. And once you get to the end, you'll send a confirmation and they'll give you a confirmation number. For the state of California, you'll go to Google and search for the California Franchise Tax Board and click on their website. And then you can go to make a payment. And I've done the same thing here, just use the bank account. And you'll go to personal. And then you'll have to type in your information here in order to continue. So once you've entered your information here, it'll take you to the next page and you'll click on the reason for the payment is an estimated quarterly tax payment. Also, in order to get your information into the system, you may have to create an account on the Franchise Tax Board website in order for them to have your information. Where when you do this for the first time, you click on create an account and they will start your account process, and then they will send you a letter in the mail. And once you get the letter in the mail, then you'll get your PIN, and then you can enter your PIN to continue creating your account. So you'll want to do this probably a couple weeks before the quarterly payment is due in order to have your account fully set up so that you can pay easily online. For those of you that live outside of the state of California, I apologize. I don't know the process for each individual state of how to pay online. But I would imagine that most states have a similar way to pay online. You'll just have to do a little bit of research to figure out how your state allows you to pay your estimated quarterly tax payments. So at the end of the year, DoorDash will send you a form that looks similar to this. It'll have your name on it, DoorDash's company name on it, and then in box number 7 on mine, it showed this non-employee compensation, which showed my total earnings. So then you'll use that, but then you'll also have to provide your deductions from your mileage tracking app. And if you've recorded any of your other expenses for your vehicle, you'll have to provide all of those when you're putting together your tax forms.
All right, so in conclusion, I just want to go over a few things, a few points. Number one, depending on what kind of car you drive, the standard deduction or the actual expenses might be more beneficial. For example, if you're driving a Prius or an electric car, the standard deduction might be more beneficial for you. Whereas if you're driving a car that requires more maintenance or that gets worse gas mileage, then the actual expenses might be a better deduction for you. So look for all of the possible deductions so that you can get the best deal out of it. One note, QuickBooks Self-Employed is a paid app. So I would imagine that might be a tax deduction as well. But there are plenty of free apps out there also if you'd rather use one of those. Just another note, I'm not a tax professional. These were just questions that I had for myself, and you should do research to find answers to your own questions. But I hope that this was helpful. And if this video was helpful to you, please leave a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this or more videos on personal finance. Thanks for watching.